good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depends on where you are around the world. I'm David Bell, and we are here with another exciting show, broadcasting not just into the UK, not just over to our friends in Latvia, in Riga as well, but also to Madrid. But we'll find out more why Spain in a short while. Now, some of you have joined some of our previous shows where we've been having great speakers, sharing great content, having great conversation, learning a little bit. I always say, if you take away something from one of these shows, that's absolutely awesome. Walking away with a little golden nugget, something you didn't know before you tuned in and joined us, is all we can ask. And today will be no different. I promise you that over the next hour, we're going to have some fantastic conversations with Connor and Natalja, who I'm going to introduce you to very, very shortly. But if you are joining us via our LinkedIn channel, welcome. Thank you very much for tuning in. You do have access to the chat today. So if you've got any questions that you wish to pose to me, or of course our experts in the room here, then please use that. Just like we've had Per Alfred, greetings from Riga. Hello, thank you for joining us. So if you have any conversation you want to ask, any questions, pop it in the chat. We'll keep an eye on that, and we will obviously try to cover off as much as that as possible. Now, do remember this session is being recorded. You'll be able to watch it back on the LinkedIn channels and on our YouTube channel in the future. As soon as this finishes, it will be live. It will be ready for you to review. Or, of course, share with others. Because if you like it, then there's great opportunity to reach out, share it with other people who may benefit from it too. And don't forget, we are running one of these webinars every single month with experts sharing about their knowledge, with their experience, and helping us to make you more knowledgeable. But while we're doing it, we're having great fun as well. So let's jump straight in. I'm going to kind of ask our esteemed guests a little bit more about them, who they are, where they are, and what they're up to. So I'm going to kick off with Connor. Connor, afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. Coming all the way, well, quite close to me, but some miles away, all the way from London here in the UK. Connor, tell us a little bit about yourself first off. Who are you?
Absolutely, and thanks for kind of having me on, David. So yeah, I'm Connor Flashman-Wells. I'm a sustainability and ESG consultant at the infrastructure consultancy Mott MacDonald, and my role is to essentially set up sustainability strategies, improve on them, and help UK infrastructure businesses to navigate major climate-related hazards. My background, I actually started from international development and really was keen to get into that space in 2021. But as kind of recent developments have shown, it's a very competitive space and very hard to kind of enter into. So through a stroke of luck and through a mutual friend of the three of us, I ended up getting pulled into an ESG consultancy, environmental, social and governance, which I'll touch on later. And that kind of looks at their focus, I suppose, was to look at businesses and improve their innovation and sustainability performance, which had a huge amount of appeal to me. So yeah, I've been working on Mott MacDonald since 2022 as a kind of result of that lineage.
Fantastic. And can I just ask, this mutual friend, would this be Professor Alan Barrell?
It certainly would be. I know he's a kind of friend of the podcast. Is that what they say about this kind of thing?
Well, to be fair to Professor Alan Barrell, unfortunately he's not with us today, but he's been on lots of the other webinars. He will be joining us next month, no doubt. But he's other prior arrangements to deal with today. He's partly the brains behind why we're here. Professor Alan and myself work together. We've been supporting each other, working very closely with ARU and with at Anglia Ruskin University in Cambridge, and also our friends over in Riga in Latvia as well. And it's a super lovely guy. And if Alan, if you're watching this on catch up, sorry you can't be here. We miss you already, but we will see you again next month. So yeah, Connor, he is kind of the linchpin, the glue behind why we're
He's
here.
the authority. Yeah.
He is indeed. Brilliant. I've got so many questions to ask, but I'm going to hand over to Dr. Natalja. And same question to you, Dr. Natalja. Tell us a little bit more about you and where are you actually? Because you're not in Latvia, are you?
I told you that no, I'm not in Latvia. I'm in Spain, actually. I'm in Madrid doing some lecturing here, even though, as you told, I'm based in Latvia, and I'm just for the short period here in Madrid. Mm-hmm.
And tell us a little bit more about you. So why are you in Madrid? You're there lecturing, but tell us a little bit more about you, your journey to where you are today. What's your knowledge and expertise?
Yeah, actually, my background is in finance since I spent more than 20 years working in finance for the big banks in the Baltics, some connection to the Nordics, to the UK. Actually, got several Nasdaq awards for my work as an individual, and later left big banks and big industry for the entrepreneurial activities. And this is actually where I have joined. Latvian Cambridge Venture Camp, because it's the 10th year we will celebrate this year. And this is, I think I'm with Latvia Cambridge Venture Camp for exactly 10 years, so for 9 years, but for the long period for sure. And then I'm in academic area since I have the PhD in economics. I'm an assistant professor in accounting and finance for the Graduate School of Law, doing the lecturing at the Stockholm School of Economics in Riga. And also I'm doing a lot for the startup industry and for the incubators, doing some courses, trainings for the new entrepreneurs, so that I'm doing a lot. And since ESG is part of the agenda of every new entrepreneur or the existing entrepreneur, this topic is very widely discussed. And also as part of the academic, as an academic person myself, I'm also facing the sustainability issues almost on a daily basis. We are discussing with other researchers also here in Madrid. We're discussing a lot this topic. So it's in our agenda, actually. So there is why for me it's very, very natural to be here. Yes.
Yeah, lovely to have you here. And we will jump in very shortly into this whole subject matter. There's lots to explore, and we're going to try and unravel and try to find out a little bit more about, the whole climate aspect, ESG, and the impact on, startup businesses, SMEs, that's small to medium-sized enterprises, and no doubt into corporate world as well. But how it affects us individuals every single day, and maybe what that future looks like. Is it as bleak as we know or we understand? Could we do things better? And what could we do? We're going to find out more. But before I do, Natalja, you're in Madrid. I've got to ask the question. What's the weather like?
It's like in the UK. It's raining.
Oh, it's sunny here in the UK. It's blue skies and lovely here. I can even see through Connor's windows it looks lovely outside. It looks misty.
Beautiful sunshine.
But beautiful sunshine. Come on, be honest. What's it like?
But in Madrid, just to mention that now everybody is moaning that they feel like Brits. They are talking all the time about the weather, and now they understand actually why Brits are talking all the time about the weather. So that's interesting situation.
But anyone tuning in, just to bring you up to speed, it's raining in Madrid. I don't know if it is raining right this moment, but it's super wet all across Spain. And there's a question coming from that: is this global climate change? Is this affecting our weather patterns, or is this just something that's happening? Hold on to the thoughts on that, because before we jump into answering that and many more questions, I'm going to kick off with probably something that's the simplest thing to get people on the same page, and come back to you, Connor. What is ESG? We hear it bantered, but what does it really mean? There's people here that might know absolutely nothing. So let's kind of bring it back to a level for everybody to start off and understand. So just talk us a little bit through ESG, what it means.
Sure, and that's a good question. What I'm going to do is take a slight step back and just, I guess, talk about sustainability initially, and then go into ESG, because sustainability as a whole is about, I guess, for businesses at least, it's about managing and meeting the 3 Ps: your profitable impacts, your people impacts, and your planetary impacts. That's also kind of known as the triple bottom line, essentially, in the sustainability space. But one, I guess, lens that you can look at sustainability through is ESG, which is basically a way for businesses to consider how its risks and opportunities impact on the environment, which is the E, the S, society, and G, its governance, how its risk management systems factor into those outcomes. When we're talking about E, those kind of environmental considerations, typically people will think about pollution, they'll think about carbon, and they'll think about waste. When you're thinking about S, you're thinking about your end users, your communities and your value chain, as well as your employees. And that might be to do with your diversity and health related impacts. And when you're thinking about the G, the governance bit, you're thinking about how diverse your board is. You're thinking about your business functions and your ability to manage those risks. So yeah, that's kind of the starting point. Of course, there is a flip side to this, which isn't that it's just about risk. It's also about opportunity. It's also about how can you relate your business model to those kind of three factors and I guess generate positive impacts for people and planet. That's also known as double materiality, but I don't want to get too far into the technicals of it. But hopefully that's a good.
Yeah, we will break it down. We'll take a bit of a deeper dive into that. So Natalja, what are these ESG factors and why are they important to businesses in the Baltic region? Not limited to, because we are talking globally here, but obviously an expert coming from the Baltics yourself. How is this important? Why is it important to those businesses in that Baltic region?
It's when in general we're talking about ESG, we're talking very much in the professional language. We're using a lot of jargon, and even when we're saying ESG, this is already the jargon which many people do not understand. And the important thing is when we talk to the companies, and when the companies are surveyed, and when they ask, do you understand ESG, a lot will say no. And different surveys, it's about 50 to 70% do not understand what is ESG. But when companies ask, so do you accept ESG, what ESG is caring about, and what is ESG? It's about doing all what you can to stop or minimize the harmful effect of your company to the environment. It's about caring about people, your customers, your employees, not discriminating. It's about obeying the laws and understanding that you're doing the correct things at all your supply chain. So all those are all the correct things we are all caring about. And then almost 70% of in different surveys, 70 to 80 to even to 90% of the people who are surveyed, they typically say, yes, we agree that we want to make the things better. And then now, when in different surveys by the United Nations, by the UK, when we are asking the large companies and the small companies, and this is the very important point here, to whom we are talking here. So the large companies, they will report, they will do everything since there is the regulation. Then we come to the smaller companies, and this is a completely different situation. And that is why when we start the conversation, and then when we come to the Baltics, the first thing maybe, and first thing, it's important to say that we are focusing here on the smaller companies, that we are not talking about all the companies, because all the companies, different situation. Small companies, this is what we're focusing here. And then again, when I'm talking about the small companies, globally, about half of them are not incorporating this word ESG in their daily agenda. And this is the UN United Nations survey. Then if I would talk about again about UK, since guys you are from the UK, then there was an interesting survey in 2023 that about 80% of the small companies not looking at the ESG. When we are now coming to the Baltics, the situation looks in the same way. But it's very important to say that when we're talking about the SMEs, the small companies, and there is what you put in this either this is like small companies till 49 employees, so till 50 employees, then the medium companies from 50 to 250 employees. But still, we're talking about the 90% of all the global business. So we're talking about almost all the companies in the world, and it's of course it's by the number, not by the revenues and so on. And so for them, we are asking, okay, guys, we understand that you don't have a lot of resources, since if you have like 20 persons, so what resources do you have? You do not have a lot of human resources. You do not have a lot of financial resources, but you need to apply the ESG principles. And they are saying, we don't, because we need to focus on the short-term financial goals, not the long-term ESG principles, since ESG is about the long-term. And this is where this clash is taking place. So what is this focus? And for the small companies, this is the short-term focus. So I don't want, I think I can talk a lot, but David, please interrupt me, and Conor, please interrupt me, because there are a lot of things, and I think I want to spare a bit for the later discussion. But yeah, so.
Yeah, no, great. I mean, you're setting the scene here really well, and I've got so many questions that I want to ask, and I'm going to try and do it in some sort of orderly fashion, so we kind of work our way through from a start to a middle to an end. But I'm going to come back to Conor here. Key benefits. Look, I'm involved with 4 small businesses myself. I wear some hats for some other organisations, one of those being Anglo Ruskin University, one being the Federation of Small Businesses in the UK, as well as the regional chair for the East of England. I'm a great supporter of startups. So, I'm working with all these businesses. And just like you were saying, Natalja, lots of people are not, I'm not saying they're not taking it seriously, but at the end of the day, business is tough in itself. Just keeping the doors open, the shutters up, getting customers coming on board, and they've got to make money to pay themselves, to pay their suppliers, to pay their staff. So sometimes the pecking order, of looking after, the ESG part and looking after the climate is slipping, and for the reasons I've just mentioned. But what are some of the key benefits to these sustainable practices for? Let's talk small business here. Let's not worry about the big corporates, because I think there may be a bit of a greenwashing happening, but there's a lot happening there. But what can we do as small businesses? What are the benefits?
Yeah, again, a great question. And to just build on Natalja's point, ESG is just one way to frame this. And it's typically when people think of ESG, they think of big businesses and they think of disclosures. They think of, TCFD, Task Force for Climate Related Financial Disclosures, if you're interested in that kind of thing. But actually, for most businesses, the disclosures point, that doesn't matter. You're not going to be in scope of these big legislations. I can't remember the exact statistic, but I think in the UK, it's like 95% of businesses have like 1 to 2 people employed, and that's it. And you're not going to be in scope for disclosures. That's not going to be what matters. So the incentives are completely different. But there are a lot of incentives to be sustainable. The first of which is, and this is purely from a selfish point of view, is that you can identify and manage your risks better. If you're looking at, if you're a business which deals in fast-moving consumer goods, then if you can look at how your supply chain is impacted by things like physical climate risks, extreme weather events, and how different climate change scenarios are going to impact that supply chain, you can plan for downtime. You can respond to potential business disruptions better. If you think about your suppliers and you get the right things in your contracts around modern slavery commitments, around labor rights, then you can manage your reputational risks. But there's also, I guess, a more carrot-oriented bit of this, which is about competitiveness. If you can identify those risks, you can outperform your competitors, essentially. When I used to do this talk for the Cambridge Latvia in-person venture camp, the statistic in 2022 was like you can become 5% more likely as a small business to outperform your competitors, which is that's such a big edge in such a competitive market, like you say, David. And there's also a bit on investability here, which is that you are more attractive to venture capitalists if you can present yourself as being able to identify and manage risks more effectively. Looking at last year, I did a little bit of Googling before this, full disclosure, but last year, the 10 biggest startup rounds, 2 of them were sustainability related businesses. They were electric car companies. The other 8 being AI companies, which I'm sure we can open the debate on AI being sustainable later. But the point is that it represents a huge opportunity for businesses if you can respond to your customer demand properly, and if you can manage your risks effectively. Do you have anything to add to that, Natalja?
Oh yeah, it's I have examples since what you have mentioned a lot of the very important points. So that if we're talking about the smaller companies, then and if we're talking about the startups and about the venture capitals and the private equity funds, they have the ESG as a very important criteria. So they are saying we will not invest into the industries which we qualify as not sustainable. For example, when we're entering the company, so we will do the ESG due diligence, and then when we are in this company, so when we're developing the company, we will do the ESG governance mechanism, we will do the ESG action plan. So there'll be very clear strategy. And as an example, I want to mention Baltcap in the Baltics. This is the biggest private equity funds which also works in the Nordics and I guess in Poland. So they have the very decent portfolio, and they provide ESG report on the annual basis, and they are super clear about where they invest, what they do, and that if you want to be the part, so in the kind of screaming that if you want to be the part, so those are the rules of the games. And typically we're saying that the largest players in the area, they set up the rules, and I'm very happy to see that this is happening, and they are quite in their report, it's quite obvious what are the rules they are setting. So Corner, this is just to demonstrate what you mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'd say I work with lots of small businesses and rub shoulders with many small businesses. And you're right, Connor. 95% of businesses in the UK, and I can't quote Latvia or the rest of the world, but 95% of the businesses in the UK are SMEs, and there's a large portion which are micro businesses, i.e., less than 5 employees. And we have a great solopreneur set up as well, where they are working from home, working for themselves. It's just one single person. And I just take one of my businesses, for example. We try to do what we can to offset and stuff like that from a carbon perspective. I drive an electric car. We do as much recycling as we possibly can. We plant trees, so we're doing certain little things, and every little helps. Okay, we have a saying, by the way, Natalja. If you ever come across a big superstore in the UK, it's called Tesco's. They have a saying, every little helps, and that's very true in everything we do in life. Every small thing helps. But what are some of these things and again, let's talk about small businesses. What are some of the things that small businesses could do? It might be things that we've just not even thought about, or maybe we're doing automatically. Is there anything that you can maybe tell us, Connor, or Natalja, maybe from a Baltics point of view as well? Just small things. What small things can we do on a day-by-day or week-by-week or month-by-month basis?
You've touched on an important point there, which is that it's there's a great opportunity to do little things and do them well, and they add up to bigger impacts. For most, because we're a service-based economy, most businesses are going to be in offices or they're going to be working from home. So the impacts you're going to have most are going to be in like your office setup, for example. They're going to be in things like your lighting, your heating, those kinds of things. So the thing you can do is think about, what bulbs are you using? That's a really simple starting point. Am I using halogen bulbs at home? They're expensive to run and they're kind of bad for the environment comparatively, and they don't last as long. Replace them with LED. It's better for the environment. They last longer. It's really a really simple kind of starting point. If you want to get into more kind of challenging and complex points, though, I guess more challenging, but more kind of exciting or transformative things for your business, start thinking about where your material impacts are as a whole business model, not just how you operate from home. Think about your value chain, your end customers. And a really good thing you can do is use some reference material. It doesn't have to be something you're going to disclose on, but you can look at something like the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, which is the 17 goals set out by the UN on kind of global ambitions for sustainability, or on the EU taxonomy, which is another investment framework, and essentially just map out where you think your biggest impacts are and just try and reduce them, just try and bring it down. Another really good example of this would be like circular economy. That's in both the EU taxonomy and in the SDG framework. If you do work in a product-based business, if you work in, let's say, skincare, and you're selling the world's best face cream, let's say, one thing you can do is look at ways to reduce your packaging, work with your suppliers who provide that packaging, and just try and scale down your packaging, essentially, and that will have a lower environmental impact. So that's a really, I guess, in my mind, that's a good starting point for improving your overall sustainability.
And it is all these small things. You talk about just something quite straightforward, maybe forgotten, but packaging. Can we slim it down? Can we use more recyclable materials, etc.? But then I suppose we go on to, okay, so when someone places an order, how we ship that face cream in this case. What courier do we use? Is there a courier that's better because they're greener, maybe because they are using electric vehicles or whatever that might be? So in our supply chain, in our delivery chain, is there sustainable businesses that we're working with? Because that's going to aid our sustainable goals and ambitions as well. So I think you're right. It's not just looking at directly within your four walls. It's looking at everything, where your products are sourced from, how it gets to you, the packaging they're using. I'm going to be very honest. I love Amazon. Okay, lots of people have questioned me on it because they're a big shipment company. But let's be honest, lots of small businesses sell their products through Amazon, so it's not damaging to the small business community. It's a door opener. However, I've ordered from Amazon, and I've ordered something, and it's been this big that's turned up. Okay, I'm just using an example. And the box it's turned up in is like that. And I go through, and it's full of bubble wrap and chips and stuff. And I get it, and it's like, why have you packed it in a box that size? Now, that is a little bit abnormal these days. They've kind of figured that out and worked it out better. But, if your business is relying on maybe shipments in from Amazon, that might not be the best outcome for your particular business. Natalja, what in the Baltics could small businesses do? Obviously, there's loads of people in the Baltic region, certainly from Latvia, running successfully small businesses like they do in the UK and around the world. What things maybe that Connor hasn't mentioned could they consider, and could we all consider as well?
When Connor started talking, I remembered about one example. I always, in the ESG area, since we have a lot of regulation and a lot of uncertainty in how to apply, what to apply, I always like looking at the big companies, large companies, public companies, since they have already done all the homework. So they have kind of interpreted all the complicated legislation, so they are giving plenty of examples, and there is what came to my mind was an example of our local public company. It's not the biggest company. They are operating the gas stations and the small food shops, convenience shops at the gas station. So, and they were giving an example how they were looking at the circular economy and the supply chain of the coffee, since coffee is consumed a lot, and this is one of the most consumed product. So they were giving particularly the name of the plantation of coffee, the certification of coffee, then where it was shipped, that they were not using any intermediaries in order to avoid all this packaging and the excessive things which are included for the intermediaries. Then it was shipped to the roastery. Then from the roastery, they were getting it into reusable containers, not in those disposable packages, but in the reusable containers. And then they were providing discounts to the customers who were buying the coffee at their gas stations. So if they were coming with their own glasses or mugs, they were giving the eatable cups if you want, so you could pay several cents extra. And then at the end, what remained from coffee, they were giving to the biogas production and to the cosmetics, which was using the coffee, what remains from the coffee beans. And I believe that those type of examples are the best when we are talking what it means, because this is just the coffee. This is something very, very applicable and very understandable. And also, when I was looking at this survey from the UK, it was more than 1,000 SMEs questions. So they were asked, so why don't you apply the ESG in your company? They were saying like, no real benefit to my business, 60%, and then there were lack of knowledge and awareness. And and if I think from that perspective, like if I show the case studies, if I try to show the real examples how the simple things like coffee are treated, this is, I think, like what shows the real benefit to your business. Because if we're talking about the knowledge, we can kind of add on this. Since I'm representing the university, and in general, the Cambridge Venture Camp is organized by the very decent universities, and we are training students, training executive training, the new entrepreneurs. But exactly those case studies and the real life examples, this is what helps us to bring it to each entrepreneur and to show how to apply that.
And really interesting. I just wrote down the figures, so hopefully I'm going to re-quote them accurately. But 60% of businesses out of the 1,000 that were surveyed, 60%. So let's just take it. This was a UK-wide survey, and that 1,000 become 100,000 or maybe 1 million. But 60% think there is no benefit. Okay, 40% say lack of knowledge and understanding. I actually think it's probably the opposite way. I actually think it's probably 100% lack of knowledge and understanding, because if they knew, then they'd see the benefits. Does that make sense? If they actually knew, if they had the understanding and the knowledge and experience, then they'd see actually there is a benefit to their business. And I'm going to pick on one, and this may be similar in Latvia and around the world, but in the UK, when people want to apply for a public tender, so a piece of work goes out to tender, everyone thinks it's about price. A tender is about price. A tender has a small fraction about the actual the final price, the quotation. What it has to do with is all the other elements. And one of those big areas in the UK now is, what are you doing to impact, maybe your carbon footprint, offsetting, and again, it's the small things. Can you demonstrate, the things that you are doing to support your supply chain, to offset, where you're buying produce on product and what goes into getting that final service delivery to us, because that government agency, and I'm not limited it to government agencies, it could be a private sector, but they want to know what that supply chain looks like. So hence they ask it in the tender. Now, if you're doing all the right things in your ESG, that's going to hopefully put you top of the pile or towards the top, and give you that 5%, Connor, you were mentioning earlier, that your business is 5% in a better place to win work than other businesses, because you've applied that mechanism earlier on. So it's these small things that can add up to winning new business and maintaining business as well. So I love the coffee analogy. I do have a portable coffee cup, refillable. I'll be honest, I'm a bit of a coffee snob. So I'm going to be very honest. So if I ever come to anyone listening and you offer me instant coffee, please don't feel, that I'm being snobby and saying I don't drink instant coffee. I prefer bean to cup. But for that reason, I make my own coffee and take it with me every day in a portable coffee cup. And then if I do go into a Costa, a Starbucks, or an equivalent, private independent that exist, of course, I would typically take that. But there is times, I'm honest, I do forget, and I have to have a paper cup. I do feel a little bit guilty, of course, but sometimes this happens. But I'm trying to do my bit. And I think if we can all try to do our bit, it's going to help. I'm going to move on to some more questions. Otherwise, I can be on my high horse for the next half an hour. Misconceptions, Connor. What are the misconceptions that business owners might have about sustainability? And I think we've probably covered a couple as we've spoken, but give us some of the bigger ones.
The biggest one, and we have kind of marginally touched on it already, is that it's complex and challenging, but it doesn't have to be. You can keep it simple. You can think about where your impacts are, and you can do things like get rid of plastic bottles in your offices. You can get rid of paper cups. You can make it so that you have filter water available on tap. There are really easy starting points. There's also a kind of general point that I think you touched on earlier about offsetting, which I think for a lot of small businesses, the deference is to offset first. It's to go, for example, we're going to partner with a charity that plants trees in XYZ places to offset our travel emissions. we're going to, I don't know another good example, but work with local communities to plant gardens or whatever. The biggest impacts are in your supply chain. Typically, it's like the vast majority of emissions are what we call scope 3 emissions, which are up and down your value chain. They rarely sit within your organization. They rarely sit within your operations. So starting on your supply chain up and downstream is the best way to have a tangible impact and effect. The other thing is that it's expensive to do, which I can totally understand why small businesses with limited resources would defer to that, but actually it represents a big opportunity for your customers. There's a really kind of good statistic on this, which is the growth of sustainability claiming products in the US grow at like 1 or 2% faster a rate per year than what you get with, I say 1 or 2%. It's like 6.2% growth for fast moving consumer goods that have sustainability related claims versus 5% that don't. So you, again, 1% growth per year, big compounding effect. So if you can tap into your customers and tap into that demand, you can make really good money out of this. Actually, you can turn this into something that's embedded in your operating model and how your business functions. The other thing is that this effort, in every sense, doesn't represent value for money, but if you do things like change out your coffee cups, if you do things like change to affordable lighting, in reality, that is going to have impacts on your bottom line. That is going to affect your ability to charge less to your clients and to reduce your operating costs. So in theory, this is just an opportunity more than anything. The other thing is that it's wholly about climate. Climate is just one of the 3 bits. The S of it, the social bit of it, is just as important, because how you relate to your consumers and how you relate to your customers is key to a functioning business, for obvious reasons. So if you can start with getting people feeling included in your business, making your employees feel like they're part of your business, it means that you spend less money on talent retention. On recruitment. It means you're spending a bit more on talent retention, but you're spending way less on recruitment, and that improves your wider business performance. And then also, I'm just rambling on a little bit here.
No, this is interesting stuff. I'm enjoying this. Keep going.
If you can think about getting a wider, more diverse group of voices within your boardroom, you have an opportunity to understand the needs of different customer types and different customer bases, which again means you're able to tailor whatever you're providing, whatever you're offering, to a wider set of people, which again has a really, really good impact on your business performance. So yeah, I think that is probably the biggest misconception. It's a burden rather than an opportunity.
I think you're right. I think from a business perspective, we'll come to Natalja in a second for kind of a follow-on on this, but I think from a business conception, small businesses, time is always a problem. We're challenged with the time. Everyone doesn't have enough time in a day. There's the same 86,400 seconds. We all get it. How we use it is important. So time is a challenge. But the other part is money, because the misconception is I need to invest lots of money. And it can be small things that, little changes day by day, week by week. So when you go to change your light bulb, we don't have to say go in and change every single light bulb in your home or office building, but that old halogen bulb that was costing you a fortune in the first place. When it comes out, put an LED one in. If you can afford to do all of them in one go, fantastic. Upfront cost, save over time. But if you can't afford to do it all at once, just make those simple changes as time goes on. So yeah, I love what you've explained there. Natalja, you can pick up on that question as well. But what challenges do businesses face when they're trying to improve on this ESG performance? So, it kind of neatly follows on. We've got misconceptions. Now people start down this route of, look, I'm going to make a difference. I can see the benefits. I'm starting to understand. I'm now better informed and better educated, which was one of the things we said. But what challenge are they going to now face on improving on it and doing it?
Yeah, so and here I want to come back to Latvia. So that to give you a bit of the feeling of the situation. So in Latvia, there was again the companies were asked, and there were the three main problems for the implementation of ESG. So the first one, like about half of employees told that half of the companies told that it's lack of motivation. And if we are talking about the motivation, and Connor was brilliant on that. What I want to add here is that ESG, we cannot escape it at the moment. Even though we are talking about the smaller companies and larger companies, they must report. There is a lot of legislation on them, and this is absolutely a different situation. They have the teams who are working on that, or they have the resources for that. But when we're talking about the smaller companies, they are part of the supply chain, what Connor has mentioned. And the big companies, when they are, it's either the tender or there is the question from their partner. So they need to disclose their supply chain, their suppliers and the suppliers of the suppliers. And there is what at some point the smaller companies will be in this loop. So they will be asked the question. So it's not the question of whether they will be, but the question is when. There is why that the lack of motivation, it will come. So if we will not be proactive, so we will need to be reactive on that. So for as a small companies, then about third companies in Latvia told that it's very difficult to measure, and about third told that there are a lot of costs associated with that. So I think at the very end I will mention a couple of tips, so how to do it for free, but about the difficulty to measure the ESG factors. As always, we have plenty of examples now because we have the ESG reports. And again, I have this, if I'm a small company, I'm in the Baltics, I look at Baltcap, the biggest private investment funds, and I look at the how they report on their portfolio companies, like smaller companies, and what are the metrics for E, for S, and for G. And for example, I have in front of me the example how they are looking at the sport club. So, and there is for environmental, there is water stewardship, energy efficiency, social, client satisfaction, client safety, governance, innovation management, data security, service standards. It's quite broad to the kind of to the very understandable area, so that you have it. This is an example of the sport club. Then there is an example of the shop. For example, there is environmental packaging and waste, what you mentioned about Amazon, for example, service CO2 footprints, renewable energy solutions. Then for social, again, product and service quality, supply chain management, data security and privacy, occupational health and safety, and governance, the ESG, leadership and stewardship. So we have very exact areas for very different areas for very different industries, because what Kona has also mentioned before, if I'm the retailer, I have one store. If I'm the IT company, I have a totally different store. And it would be very incorrect to think that if I'm a retailer, I need to think about ESG because there is a supply chain, or as I made an example of the gas station. So if we are selling coffee, we need to think about the supply chain of this coffee. But if I'm like an accounting company or an IT company, I'm a service provider, very small, what you mentioned, 1-2 persons or 3 persons working. So why should I think about this? And this is absolutely a misconception, because it's still the greenhouse and the CO2 emissions when we're thinking about the electricity or air costs or the heating devices. It's about the data privacy. It's about health and safety and diversity and inclusion if we're talking about the employees. Again, the supply chain and management. So there are a lot of points which are applicable to almost every company. But of course, depending what you're doing, to which scope you're doing, you would have more or less of those areas which you need to think about. But again, so those areas are known. Those areas are given as an example for almost every industry. So just take them and start thinking about them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great tips there. So let's just say, Connor, we're on our journey. We've started to implement some of these small but significant changes into our business, changing the light bulbs, maybe, thinking about our supply chain, thinking about our packaging, thinking about how we get goods delivered. So we've now moved forward a step. I suppose the big question here now would be, we're on that journey, we're on that path, but how do we measure and track the impact that we are having? What can we do to now measure this and understand that them small things are making a big difference?
So one of the challenges, I think, is that exactly like that whole thing of making sure you can measure what you're doing into a tangible outcome. My advice is to, if you want to be bold and be ambitious, start at a strategic level. Like, what's your business ambition? If you are, I don't know, if you work in like automations or recruitment, if your ambition is to transform the recruitment industry, you want to improve connections between startups and candidates, then you have to relate that to tangible outcomes that can impact people and on planet. So let's say if that is your business model, if you're want to transform the recruitment industry, your outcomes might be increasing access to your digital platform, and your objective therefore might be to improve digital literacy and access to the internet. So what you can do is you can partner with a phone company like a Back Market to share refurbished phones with local communities, for example, and then you just set a target of the number of phones you're going to supply to local communities within a set date. So let's say 1,000 phones to low-income communities by 2027. And the idea behind that is you can actually take a tangible outcome at a business level that's going to contribute to your competitiveness, your performance, and relay it right down into how you're performing from an ESG angle. When it comes to actually measuring those, turning that into measurable targets, the best advice I can give is log that data, have really solid procurement notes between you and your suppliers, and make that data as auditable as possible. Like, don't have 1,000,001 spreadsheets where you're logging data in one place and it's pulling through into a target in another place. Make clear definitions is the next bit of advice I'd give. If your ambition is like 200,000 people impacted by your product, define that really, really clearly and make sure that if you could calculate it, you could hand it over to an auditor or you could hand it over to a colleague and they'd be able to repeat it. So it really is about kind of just good data management processes. That's really what it comes down to. The other thing is clear roles and responsibilities. So making sure that you have clear owners within your businesses for each of those targets so that you know where that data is coming from. And ultimately, like I said, centralize it and automate as much as possible. Just take the manual handling out of it. You'd be so shocked to see how many mistakes are made within data just by having one person taking some data, putting it in another place, another person takes it and they put it in another place. So it's just about good auditability and good data management, really. But yeah, that's kind of the way I'd see it anyway, from like a strategic down to a day-to-day view. Related to your business strategy and build the right systems, in short.
There's a slight pause there because my doorbell was going. You might have got a glimpse of it, and then I muted myself because it carries on going until someone picks up the door. Probably a delivery coming from Amazon, probably, most definitely. I imagine. Hopefully not in a big box. It's probably in a nice small compact one. So look, measuring, and I love the point about making it auditable, putting it in one place, because otherwise you end up with this here, that there, and then it's meaningful, because if you can't collate the data and get to understand it, then you're not going to know what's really happening. And I think it's really important. It's like anything in a business, okay, and in life generally, but in business, we need to measure. If we don't measure, we don't know what impact it's having. And we don't know if it's having a positive impact, a negative impact, or if we could do things better. So, yeah, I totally get we've got to measure, and not just measure, but review. So go back and look at that data as well. Don't just store it and then go, oh, well, we're ticking a box. Because I think some businesses do this for a box ticking exercise. We are doing it, tick. And I get that is ticking a box maybe for them to win work and, wear the badge and say, yes, we're behind it. But what's the point? What we really want to do is enhance our businesses, make our businesses slicker, more sustainable, be able to be more adaptable to changes and stuff like that, more resilience, which is where my next question goes to Natalja. ESG practices help businesses become more resilient during time of crisis. So, look, we're seeing crises, from famine to war to pandemics, etc. How can this help and support businesses? How can ESG practices help us? And Baltics, talk about the Baltics, please. But I'm sure what you're going to share is going to be relevant to everybody listening.
Yes, there was a very good study after COVID how ESG was, or how the application was affected by COVID. I kind of, if I remember, I will come back to that because it's exactly what you're talking about. Because very when we're talking about the ESG, we are still talking about the bigger companies. But let's say if I'm a small company, if I'm like 1-2 persons, what you told, the most of the companies are 1-2 persons. So what should I do? And what will be my first points maybe when it's not the key area I want to focus and I don't have resources? And a bit what Conor has talked about the bigger companies, it's start on the strategic level, because very, very often, again, when I'm talking to the companies, talking to the entrepreneurs and asking, so are you considering ESG? They're saying at the later points, when I have resources, when we are growing. And very often when we're talking about ESG, we're saying you need to start from the beginning. So just start from the very, very beginning, because at later point it could be too late, because you need to define it in your mission, vision, how you are strategically looking at your company. And this is only then you're more resilient, when you're already at the strategic point, you know where you're going. Because even though we know that, and we are aware of the situation that at the very beginning, the small companies are like a fly. So they don't have the clear path or way where they are flying, right? So, but still to be resilient and to do your business so that you're not affected by the quite interesting environment we are facing during the past 5 years or past 7 years, right? So that especially now we in the Baltics, we feel it a bit more. So there is why I would say started on the strategic level, repeating what Conor taught. What does it mean? Your mission, vision should include the ESG areas, preferably even in the way how you formulate this, not just, but absolutely in the way you're thinking about this, but also it's better to put in the formulation. And also it's better to have a person, even if you have 1 or 2 persons in your company, but preferably the better, the more the better, right? So you should have 1 person who is responsible for the sustainability area. We are saying that preferably there is a sustainability team, but I'm talking about small companies. I'm down to earth person, so I prefer, not to talk about the large companies. They are good, doing quite good without us, right? So we are talking about the entrepreneurs, startups, small companies, 1, 2, 3, 4 persons. So make sure that there is 1 person who is responsible for sustainability. What does it mean, responsible? So is aware what is sustainability. And I think 1 person in the company could read what is ESG about, could listen to our webinar, could ask AI in case we are still too complicated, right? But AI is not saying the truth all the time, right? We are aware about the hallucination. So, and then this person is making a word about sustainability in the company, keeping the small focus or just looking from the sustainability perspective on the things which are happening in the company. And of course, at some later points, there is this materiality assessments done and so on. But this is at the later point. But first, put it in the vision and mission of the company and make sure somebody is responsible for sustainability. And then the first steps are done. And those are the 3 steps. They do not cost any money at this point, right? Because we're not talking about any additional infrastructure, any additional IT system. So we're talking about three small steps, which will make the big difference at the later point.
Yeah, excellent. Connor, back to you on this. So we as business owners have kind of made the commitment for our vision and our mission to, start to make a difference. How do we get, and we're just maybe we're slightly bigger, maybe if we're 3 or 4 employees, it's probably a little bit easier. But let's just say we're 20 or 25 employees. We're still a small business. How do we get our employees on board? How do we get them to kind of, without cracking the whip and dangling the carrots, how do we say to them, look, guys, this is the best for not just for our business, the best for you, your families, our general welfare, and of course, the best for, the world as well. How can we get our employees to go, yes, I'm behind this?
So everything under the S can kind of be of ESG can kind of be distilled down into good engagement, I would say. Typically, historically, the debate about the S of ESG has been about diversity and board makeup and getting a varied range of voices in your boardroom. Now the movement is more towards engaging people and making them feel included through things like pulse surveys and taking that feedback on board. So that's I think that is kind of at the core of it. It's about building a culture where people feel part of your business, they feel part of that business model. And as a result, they're more likely to buy into your value statement, essentially, that you want to deliver a sustainable product or service. And that's the same approach you take with your customers, right? You do focus groups, you do market research, you'd engage with them, and you develop a competitive product out the back of it. So that's kind of where I'd start. To Natalja's point, which you just touched on about having a specific sustainability function, as you grow, the best thing you can do is actually, rather than having a specific team that deals with sustainability, to just try and embed it in your existing operations and business functions. So if you're relying on, if you're an asset owner or investor, let's say, a much bigger company, obviously, but it's the thing that popped into my head, and you've got an asset management function and you've got a risk management function or a financial department, make sure that the roles that you've set up within those teams include ESG considerations, that those things are built in to that everyday activity, because ultimately sustainability kind of sits in its own nexus in a lot of ways. It can sit in its own space, but really once you start building that into your operating model, then that's where you generate real impacts, and that's where it becomes almost business as usual when people feel more included and engaged in sustainability as a whole.
Yeah, brilliant. Time is against us. We've got a few minutes left on the clock. There's been a bit of chatter going on in kind of the Q&A section. I'm not expecting any answers here, but I just want to bring it to the surface so everyone can kind of hear what's going on. So Elmar's has put, what are the differences, by the way, between UK and Europe-based companies in regard to ESG implementation? Is there a quick answer to that, Connor or Natalja? Can you maybe answer that in, what's the difference between UK and Europe, UK and Latvia? Is there any differences from your point, Natalja, that you see in Latvia happening compared to maybe where you are in Madrid now, compared to your knowledge of the UK?
So when I come to Madrid, I think ESG was not my first topic to look in Madrid for, but we were discussing it with the researchers and we were discussing it at the lectures. So that it's still a lot about the legislation, which is the new legislation on the European level, which is applied, the legislation which is not applied, but the new legislation which is introduced and then it's applied. Because when the legislation is introduced and later it's applied, there is a transition period for the companies to understand how they would report, how they would apply to their company. So I think the most focus is now on this, because there is the topic in general, the ESG topic we are talking about today is very dynamic. It's developing with the extremely high speed right now. So the legislation is coming. So we see the new practices. We see again this ESG scoring being developed. And if at the moment I can, let's say, find the score for a couple of Baltic companies, let's say, being defined, and in a year I would find almost for all of them, for example. So there, it's very dynamic. So what is happening right now, and what we will see in 1 year. So there will be a big difference. Yeah, so I think this is the primary area of discussion right now. And also since 2025, there some more areas are implemented by the larger companies. Again, we're talking about the larger companies because for the smaller companies, even though I was mentioning that ESG is part of the smaller companies, they are inevitable part of all the supply chain and all this framework. I do not see that the very strict, very long lists of criteria should be applied for the small companies, because as we mentioned, other factors are so important for the small companies. We cannot make this too much for them. So there is why small companies should be aware. But again, all the burden is at the moment on the larger companies, and this is where all the focus is. So
yeah, indeed it is. We are at the top of the hour, so we're going to wrap up now. But I've got one last question to ask from both of you. One top tip you can leave our listeners, our viewers with. If there's one thing that you could suggest to them to go away and do today, what would that one single thing be? Connor, start with you. One thing.
Oh, that's a tough one. I guess my suggestion would be to read the FSB guidance on sustainability in small businesses, especially if you're UK based, because a lot of that is tailored to a UK audience. But they have a lot of really great just starting guides for embedding sustainability in small businesses. So I think that's a really good jumping off point. That would be my suggestion in the initial.
And the quickest way for them to find that is probably just to Google it. Is that the quickest way?
Probably just to Google it. Yeah, let me chuck a link in the chat.
Pop a link in the chat if you can find it in time. That would be great. While you're doing that, thank you, Connor. So just, I suppose, educate yourself better. Have a read, get a better understanding, better knowledge. Natalja, what's your top tip you'd leave everybody with today?
You know, I'm a strong believer in doing the things. So I think we can talk a lot, but unless we apply to the real life, so this all are just words. So there is what, if you ask about one single thing, it's maybe subdivide into two, or if at least one, then assign somebody in your company to look at your company from the sustainability perspective. So if it's just one. Two, I would say look at it from the strategic position, but many small companies do not look at their companies from the strategic position. So there is why this may be a bit broader discussion, because how important is strategically assign what you are doing and understand where you are going. So this is a broad topic, but if you say one applicable thing to do, assign one person who will talk about or who will care about the sustainability in your company, and do it tomorrow.
There we go. So lots of top tips from my special guests here today, Connor and Dr. Natalja. Thank you to you both for spending your time, sharing your knowledge, your experience. I'll be honest, I've learned so much. I've made a page of notes here that I will go back over. I'm going to have to rewatch this because some of it's kind of gone in and I've been thinking it's kind of seeped out, but I think that's what we've got to do. We've got to keep educating ourselves. We can't just take one show today and think we know it all now. We go and use a bit of ChatGPT, but make sure you do the research off the back of it. Carry on speaking to the experts. But my top tip I'm going to leave everybody with today, just go away and do it. From the stuff that you've heard, if you haven't made a start, make a start. If you haven't changed a light bulb, change a light bulb. If you haven't looked at your supply chain, look at your supply chain. Little things make a big difference because every little counts. It's bye-bye from me. Say goodbye,
Thanks, David. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Catch you soon.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.